All right. Welcome, everyone. I am the manager of the dev room and also presenting this talk. It doesn't mean that I selected my own talk, because that would be very easy. We have a whole panel of people voting on talks, and somehow I selected. So I'll be talking about OpsTheater. It's a project that we've been working on over the past year and a half. And today I want to explain to you a little bit about what we've done so far. Hopefully make you excited. Firstly, about myself, my name is Walter Heck. I am doing technical stuff at OpsTheater. I started the company in 2008, but then I decided that I'm better at technical stuff than running companies. So my beautiful wife is now the CEO, and she does a much better job than I did, and I can focus on the technical stuff. So, that works very well. I am a puppet instructor. I wouldn't normally mention that because it's not, I don't like bragging, but it's relevant for this talk because we have built the whole thing in Puppet code, so I guess that makes it relevant. My background is MySQL. I've done a whole bunch of MySQL DBA stuff. I started my career 7 years of Delphi programming. Hands up if you like Delphi. Yeah. The only true programming language. No. Might be inside your eyes, but it made me love a whole bunch of functionality that I haven't seen yet in many other programs. I love open source, which is also why I'm standing here, and I've been in IT for almost a decade. While I was writing that this week, I was like, it is what it is. So first up, the problem that we saw. So there's many new tools. Every morning you wake up and there's a mentioning of a new tool that you want to look into and that you want to start using, etc., etc. But time is limited, and so is your brain, so that's not possible. However, over time, we usually see a good number of tools that become sort of best practice and turn out to be working together quite nicely. However, as that stack of tools grows that can manage parts of our infrastructure, so grows the time that we are investing in managing the infrastructure to manage our infrastructure. Puppet is really nice, but now you're maintaining a Puppet master, and you need to put your code into some kind of version control. You're working with version control. You want to do some kind of a linting, so you need to make sure that your code adheres to lint. All of this is all great, it's all nice, and it delivers you good quality code, but it's all time that you're spending on not managing those web servers that run your company's front-end website. That is what you actually hired for. And this has a tendency to get a bit out of control if you're not careful about it. So I see more and more time is spent on managing these tools. Is this microphone working or is it dropping out? Now we've had problems all day. The second part of the problem is that you're managing a Red Hat infrastructure, you're managing a Red Hat infrastructure, and I'm managing a Red Hat infrastructure. A lot of the things that we're doing are actually the same. There is not much difference between your, let's say, young mirrors and mine. Just that we want to keep it private and inside our company and on premise and all of these things, whatever your requirements are. But in reality, we're just doing the same work. And I don't particularly like doing work that other people also do. So we started thinking about this. We all want centralized logging. It shouldn't be something that you have to think about and you want to set up infrastructure for. Obviously, the larger your the infrastructure that you have to manage, the more you have to think about these things. But let's say sub 100 servers, you don't really want to think about what do I need to do to get centralized logging going. You just want it to work. So we saw these problems in practice because my company, we do consulting, so we go from customer to customer, and we see the same Maybe we should turn off the screen saver first? It's not my laptop because my laptop I cannot use it because it doesn't connect, etc. Ooh! Was that 7 minutes on the same slide?
Yeah.
Oh,
We will.
I blabbered too much. Yeah, so doing all these consulting projects with different companies, we saw over and over, we kept doing the same thing. You know, this can be style. So we started thinking about, okay, what if we come up with a stack of these tools that we keep using over and over. We convince our clients to use that tool stack or convince us of reasons why they shouldn't use that specific tool and should use something else. And we work on making a well-integrated solution for the basics of infrastructure management. And so was the idea for OpsTheater was born. So the idea is that we are using Puppet to stitch together a bunch of other tools. In this case, we have, because we're managing our infrastructure with Puppet, we are also in need of some kind of version control. Lots of companies, unfortunately, are still scared of not on-premise. So GitLab seems to be a good contender. They are making really awesome software really quickly, you know, unless you're on gitlab.com this week. But for those who didn't laugh, that you either have no sense of humor or you didn't know, there was no, they managed to drop their production database and all of their 5 backup sources were not working, so they had a bit of a few sleepless nights. Either way, on-premise GitLab, coupled with the CI, the continuous integration solution from GitLab, works really well. I have a session about GitLab CI tomorrow morning at 10 minutes to 11 in the testing and automation room if you want to see what it does. Then we have server monitoring, where we chose Isinga. Isinga is originally was a Nagios clone. By now, it doesn't use a single line of Nagios code anymore, but it's still compatible with Nagios, and it seems to be quite a popular server monitoring tool. Then centralized logging, we have the Elk stack. I think they are trying to get us to call it something else, but I think that everybody by now knows it as the Elk stack. Elasticsearch, Logstash, Kibana. We added Grafana with that because it's, I'll show you in a minute. And on the front, FileBeat to push logs to Logstash. And then last but not least, ChatOps. In this case, we chose Mattermost. Mattermost is an open source Slack alternative. They have been doing really nice things as well in the past 2 years. Mattermost comes integrated with GitLab, so if you're installing the community edition of GitLab, it's literally a matter of one configuration parameter, and you are up and running with Mattermost. Surprisingly, that was not another 7 minutes. It was 4, I count. Surprisingly, communication in many companies is the source of many problems. So maybe I'll just use actual keys. I think that works. Surprisingly, communication is the source of many problems in many companies, especially as they grow larger. And a surprising amount of people have not jumped on the Slack, HipChat, whatever bandwagon. Mattermost is a nice, cost-free, easy entry solution to get that going. And just creating a room called engineering that anyone from any team that's interested in engineering can join can do wonders. We've seen this in a number of our clients where all of a sudden people started communicating, and before it was, oh, well, we'll submit a ticket to the networking team, and you know how this goes. Not very nice. But so just providing a low barrier place for people to communicate is quite useful. So that's why ChatOps is a part of those fundamental pillars of OpsTheater. We are all supposed to be experts on one or more of these topics, so why not share our knowledge and make things together so that we all benefit from the standard open source stuff. How does this look in a picture? This picture doesn't actually name products, but it is very easily one-to-one mappable to products. So we have orchestration and provisioning is Puppet in our case. At the bottom layer we have your infrastructure. It doesn't really matter what kind of infrastructure it is. OpsTheater is the part that comes in after you have your operating systems up and running, because you need a Puppet agent installed in order to start configuring stuff. That's kind of the level where we come in. So you have your infrastructure, and then we use Puppet here in the middle. Puppet here in the middle for configuration management, some orchestration. We're currently researching putting Ansible in for the orchestration part. Your Puppet code lives in version control. This is GitLab. Whenever you check something into version control, it automatically triggers a build in GitLab CI to check if everything is fine. If GitLab CI, for instance, finds a problem, it automatically posts a message in your Mattermost room saying, hey, this build is broken, so that everybody who's interested in it can see. We have our monitoring solution here, Isinga, which monitors all of the infrastructure, and we have centralized logging and analysis with Logstash, Elasticsearch, and then Kibana and Grafana as a GUI for that. So the point is that all of these tools are not made by us, and I don't want to be spending time on making these tools. The point is that we make this set integrated nicely, so that you don't have to go and spend a ton of time on setting up your Elasticsearch, your Logstash, and make sure that it all logs to the right place, and et cetera, et cetera. So the vision is to have a combination of publicly acknowledged best practices open source software. I was considering putting enterprise backed in there because personally I think it's quite important that if you're using open source tools in a company that's larger than a few people, at some point somebody is going to say, I want to pay for support. Regardless of whether you think that's a great idea, that is the reality, and therefore we see that the open source projects that have some kind of enterprise backing generally are more successful in the enterprise environments because people can go out and buy a check mark in a box. So we use all of these pieces of open software and we glue them together using Puppet so that it becomes easier to manage it all. I have a demo after the slides are up, but it's going to be a bit limited because the demo is running on my laptop and this is just SSHing into my laptop. But I'll show you as much as I can. So basically we're building an abstraction layer that hides or makes easier all of the things that you need to do that are not specific to your business. There's a few examples here. If you push a new code to GitLab, it needs to be tested by GitLab CI, and when that goes well or doesn't go well, a notification should go to chat room, et cetera, et cetera. This is standard. It doesn't matter what kind of company you're in or what you're trying to do. This should not be something you need to think about setting up. And so goes for all the other items, and you can think of probably 100 more. I would even say that you can get to like 50% of all the stuff that you're doing is actually not specific or unique to your company. Think of it as building packages versus compiling software. Compiling software was the thing before, but then we figured out that package management is actually quite convenient and takes away a lot of hassle, so why not do the same on operations level? That said, who is this for and who is it specifically not for? If you want to use it, that's totally fine, but for infrastructures with less than 10 servers, it doesn't really make sense because as it stands now, with all of these pieces of software, you need about 4 to 5 virtual machines to run all of this. So if you have less than 10 servers to manage, then you can wonder whether that overhead actually makes any sense. Non-Puppet environments, if you're already using Chef or Ansible or Salt to configure everything, then probably retrofitting OpsTheater into your environment is going to be a lot of cursing and of discussable benefit. pure Sun Cloud environments, if you're doing Amazon, for instance, the Amazon way, as I like to call it, then Puppet is probably not your best tool of choice. And you can wonder whether you want to dive into the wormhole of trying to fit OpsTheater on Amazon. It'll run, and you can do it if you really want to, but I wouldn't say that that's necessarily the best tool of choice. And the last one, if you already have a fully implemented and automated environment, then it's probably also not very much used. On the other hand, if you have already used one or more of these tools, so I'm now consulting with a client, and they were already using GitLab, they were already using Nagios phone for monitoring, so it wasn't a very big stretch to start introducing the new tools one by one until we had the full OpsTheater stack there. Completely new environments, that's obviously where it becomes the most useful. Sorry. Completely new environments where there is nothing yet, that makes for an ideal candidate because then you can get up and running fairly quickly. And if you already have skills in one or more of these tools, then your life is going to be considerably easier because you don't have to learn a whole bunch of new technology very quickly. The current state of OpsTheater is we just released version 2 this week, which I'm very happy with. It was a while in the making, but we're there. You can check it out, OpsTheater.com, which will just redirect you to GitLab. The new things in version 2 is that it is easier to get started. So before you had to do a whole bunch of stuff to even check out what it does. Now you can just git clone, go to the right directory, and call the right vagrant up command and wait 45 minutes because it takes a while for a Puppet master using the format and using MySQL and GitLab and all of these things to get installed, but it does work without interaction. We have started to move towards smart parameters in the format as opposed to HIRA. Somebody mentioned it in the questions after the last talk. HIRA is really nice, but if you have large infrastructures, it gets fairly complicated. And the other thing we found is that very often you have people in your operations teams, especially if you have application administrators, they don't want to learn how to git commit, clone, pull, branch, merge, whatever. They just want to make sure that, I don't know, this application points at it, or the load balancer points at a different URL, whatever. So using the format, that becomes a bit easier. Basic stuff like SMTP and LDAP, if you want to use them, you have to fill them out in one of the config files and throughout the whole environment. All of the tools will be configured with LDAP and SMTP. That sounds like basic stuff, but again, this is stuff that we are all doing that shouldn't be specific to our environment. The address that you want to be using, yes, that's specific. The Active Directory group or the LDAP group that you want to be using, yes, okay, that's specific. But the fact that you want to be able to log into GitLab using LDAP, that's not unique for your environment. It's basically the first version where we have basic integration for all the tools that we have. And now it becomes a matter of making it more smart. Where can we add more integrations and more things? We're thinking about, for instance, a Grafana dashboard that automatically shows groups of servers and automatically creates graphs when you add a new server to your infrastructure. It automatically shows up in Grafana. These kind of things are up for the next releases. So that's the road ahead. We've just, in one of the deployments, we've enabled the Mattermost notifications from Logstash. So Logstash has a Slack API. Mattermost has a Slack API. Logstash has a Slack output. So you can enable a Logstash output for certain log messages so that they show up automatically in your Mattermost chat rooms. Very basic stuff, but let's say a failed Puppet run, you want to know about it, or maybe you don't, and that's also fine. So we're playing around with that. more chatbots, more interactive chatbots. So a bot where you can say, show me this Grafana dashboard for that server. Give me a Kibana URL that automatically takes me to all of the queries regarding X, Y, Z. That kind of stuff is coming up. Package management, we found out that in the deployments that we've done so far, almost everybody wants to use on-site Yum repositories, not the public internet Yum repositories. So either Catello or some other way to make it easier to have your own package version. Easier deployment. Someone in our company has been working on Packer and Terraform stuff to be able to Terraform into whatever cloud or infrastructure you want. Security scans, the Foreman has a nice plugin for OpenSCAP, so that's in the plan. Backups, I'm not sure about. I'm welcome to hear your ideas about that later if you have them. Whether backups is something that is generic enough to have an opinion about, because most companies that I've seen already have a certain backup solution in place, and I don't think that, I'm not sure whether it is a great idea to automate that into OpsTheater as well. So that is the road ahead. How can you help? First of all, just try it out. If you want to bring up the full stack, I warn you, it takes about 12 gigabytes of memory. But there is a Vagrant environment for it. So if you go to gitlab.com/OpsTheater, and then there you can find the instructions on how to get it working, up and running. Right now it's hosted on our OpsTheater.com GitLab, and that is simply because it's still a fairly young and small project, and it doesn't make sense yet to have it hosted on its own. However, I would prefer to decouple OpsTheater from OpsTheater. We don't intend to ever make money off of this other than selling services or something like that, but the code itself will always be open source, because I don't believe that such a project lends itself to proprietary code or proprietary add-ons. As to functionality, if you are very skilled at Terraform, then please take a look at what is there now and see if you can improve it. There are some requests for being able to not use tool XYZ and be able to use tool ABC instead. So let's say that you want to be able to use Splunk instead of Elasticsearch, or you want to be able to use good old Nagios instead of Xinga. I want to make that possible, so if that's your interest, then please go ahead. Spread the word. The OpsTheater Twitter account, I created it yesterday because I realized there wasn't one, so the internet is full of conversations with it, but not. We need a website. I am not a web developer, and I will never be, so right now if you go to OpsTheater.com, it just redirects you to gitlab.com/OpsTheater. There was something else last week, but I decided that was so horrible that we just ditched all of it. So in short, any help is welcome, even if it's just bitching or coming to me after this session and telling me that you like it or you don't like it, or you have different ideas, or you're doing something similar, or we work together, etc., etc. Very open. And then I was going to use the rest of this time for a demo. However, this is going to be a bit more challenging. We'll give it a try anyway. What I have done is what I have done here is this is a Git clone of the OpsTheater repository. Yes, here. And I edit session, make the background white. easier to read. Except for the yellow. Let's make the yellow something else. That didn't change my yellow. Well, either way, that's it. And then you can see back. So right now I'm sitting in the top directory, which has a bunch of stuff in it. So basically, the OpsTheater repository as it is a Puppet control repository with some extra directories that have some extra stuff in it. Namely, here the deploy directory has a subdirectories for Packer, Terraform, and most notably Vagrant Oscar. Let me show you Vagrant Oscar a little bit. So Vagrant Oscar is quite nice. So if you see here, it's a plugin for Vagrant, originally developed by, I believe, the Puppet Labs support department to quickly create Puppet Enterprise environments, but it's very useful for a whole bunch of other stuff as well. So in our Vagrant environment, you will find a master. This is the Puppet Enterprise master, and we'll find the FOSS master, which is Puppet Open Source master. Isinga instance, Elasticsearch, GitLab, MySQL. The Elasticsearch engine will also run Kibana and Grafana and Logstash. So it's quite busy. If you want to deploy this in a larger production environment, you're going to have to split it up, but all the Puppet code makes that easy. MySQL, and then we have 4 test machines, the PE client, the FOSS client, RHEL 7, RHEL 6, and then the Ubuntu Trusty client. So right now we have a bunch of them running. However, normally you are probably used to a Vagrant file that has a whole definition of all of this stuff. You won't find that here. What we do is we set some environment variables that we'll use somewhere down the line. And then here, this is the Vagrant up command. So we load some Oscar config and then do a Vagrant configure with the config that comes out of Oscar. And to show you what Oscar can do, it's quite nice. So in Oscar, you have 2 main files. You have a roles.yaml and you have a vms.yaml. VMs are the actual machines that you want to configure, and roles is a list of different roles that each VM can have. So we see here, for instance, a role for a Puppet Enterprise master, for a managed host, for different machines with different amounts of memory. So all this does, if I assign this role to a host, it gets 2 gigs of memory from VirtualBox, 1 gig of memory, etc. Down here, we have, this is all the code that is needed to turn a machine into an open source Puppet master, an enterprise agent, a Puppet agent that will register itself in the foreman, a RHEL 7 agent, etc., etc. So here we have all of our roles. They are small pieces of code. And then in our vms.yaml, we have VMs. So here you'll find, for instance, the definition for a FOSS master. We give it a host-only IP address so that it works in any network that you're in. We determine which box that needs to be deployed on this. So it's working on a CentOS 7.2 box at the moment. We give it a host name, and then these roles are the roles from the roles.yaml that I showed before. So this becomes quite nice because instead of having a bunch of repeated code in each machine only has a number of roles assigned to it. So you have here, for instance, our Elasticsearch machine needs to be registered with the foreman after it's up and running, but our Isinga machine also needs to be registered with the foreman. Instead of repeating that piece of code or putting it in an external script, we just do that here. Anyway, this Vagrant environment is mostly for development, so I won't go too deep into this. So, yeah, we have our Vagrant status. So we have our the whole stack up and running on that on this laptop here. The downside is that because I'm SSH'd into that laptop, I cannot actually show the web interfaces at the moment because they are running on a host-only VirtualBox here. But that said, I can show you something else, which is, let's say we want to add a new machine to this. So imagine that if you're on in a production environment, you wouldn't do this with Vagrant, but you'd bring up what I'm doing right now. You would be doing this in, I don't know, VMware or whatever your infrastructure management is. So let's call this FOSS client FOSDEM. Now I can bring it up by saying FOSS client FOSDEM. So while we wait for that to finish, here on our Puppet Master, I cannot actually show you the foreman because of things. I can show you that right now we have a bunch of certificates. So we have our Elasticsearch machine, our FOSS, one of the test machines, GitLab, Isinga, the Puppet Master itself, and my SQL machine up and running. And after this is finished running, you log into it, and then it will show up here as well. So it will automatically be, this machine will automatically be registered in our Puppet Master. You'll see in a minute, you'll hopefully see it automatically get the Isinga client installed, and it registers itself with Isinga. It starts FileBeat and starts automatically sending logs to Logstash. So all of these things are things that I don't want to necessarily be thinking about. Vagrant is very colorful with its output, and we are going to need one more. So one of the things that you see here on the right-hand side, just where it says all of these machine names, it says updating hosts. This is actually a Vagrant plugin. So the Vagrant Oscar comes with a plugin where it is able to insert etc hosts records on all of the machines that are already running inside the same Vagrant environment. So if I go on my Puppet Master now here, and get etc hosts, we'll see FOSDEM.OpsTheater VM here. Obviously, etc hosts is a poor man's DNS, so we wouldn't actually do this in a production environment, but this would be managed in your actual DNS environment. So we didn't want to make etc hosts part of OpsTheater because it's really not best practices outside of anything else. Oh, I see. Kept the IP address the same. Let's see what happens. L7, so we'll destroy the other machine so that we don't get an IP conflict. So the way, I don't know if you're familiar with the way Puppet works, but in order to have things happen on one machine that you did on another machine, it requires what is called exported resources, and that means that a Puppet run has to happen on the first machine that is exporting its definition, and then another Puppet run has to happen on the other machine. In this case, we have our new client that runs Puppet, and after that has run Puppet, it exported the fact that it exists to Isinga, or to the Puppet master actually, and then when we run Puppet on the Isinga node, we'll see automatically the node appearing. Now we should be able to get into this thing. So as you see up here, at the very start of the Puppet run, cannot because all message closed run. At the very start of the Puppet run, you'll see an error message saying, hey, I don't know this machine, because when this machine first connects to the Puppet master, it says, hey, I've never seen that machine before. But because of the way the foreman is set up, it automatically registers itself. It just doesn't get any configuration yet. So as you see here, it's immediately done configuring. All that it did is sync a bunch of plugins. But if I run Puppet Agent, it didn't actually sync any plugins. Normally, I would show you here in the web interface of the foreman how the machine shows up here. But for now, you'll just have to believe me or try it yourself. So now it's run once and it's made itself, the moment the Puppet report arrives at the Puppet master knows of this machine. So if I now do Puppet search, you'll see here the machine is registered. However, it doesn't get any configuration yet because I don't want that. I don't want random machines getting random configuration. So what I need to do is go into my foreman instance and assign a class to it. I'll just assign a basic class to it. There. So I've assigned a standard class to it that comes with OpsTheater. It's a basic role that deploys Isinga agent and file read, etc., etc. So now you'll start seeing the machine getting configured with those specific classes. That'll take a little bit of time, and after that is done, we can also run the Puppet agent on the Isinga node, and then watch it appear from there. You got a question? Yeah, so the thing is that, so the question is, if you search for OpsTheater on Google, you will find a GitHub repository that has nothing in it. The problem is that we, for a while, we were hosting on GitHub, but then we thought to ourselves, okay, we are bringing out the message of OpsTheater, so we should eat our own dog food and host on our own stuff. And then for a while we were hosted on GitLab and mirrored on GitHub, but that is a total nightmare. I don't know if you've ever tried that, but it's a no-go. So ignore everything on GitHub. Everything lives on GitLab only, and there is documentation. Sorry? Say that? What? No. He says it's there. Oh, maybe the Google link goes to a 404. It doesn't for me. Yeah, or you need to look at the files that are in the docs repo. Anyway, yes, thank you. Issue, submit an issue and we'll fix that. The thing is that we've just released 2.0 this week, so some of that stuff still points to an older version. Probably that is a link to 1.7. Anyway, our Puppet run here is finished now, and you'll see that if we scroll up a little bit, oh, you have your scrolling set the other way than I have. So you'll see that it exported a bunch of, created a bunch of endpoints. You'll see up here that it created some other Icinga stuff. The file.yaml you see here, it's all being created. So now, if we go on our Icinga node and we run a Puppet agent here, so by now you might be thinking, or some of you might be thinking, hey, but I have all of this stuff already, so what's the point? The point is that all of this stuff that you're seeing here is not specific to any environment, and therefore anybody can use this. And if you start thinking in that abstraction layer where anything that's not specific to your environment you put into OpsTheater in this case, you will arrive at a much cleaner configuration for the stuff that is specific for your infrastructure. The last couple of environments where we've deployed this, the Puppet code that is specific to the environment of that specific environment, that is actually very little compared to all of the other stuff. So here you see the So you'll see here our FOSDEM host has been created automatically. And the same goes for Icinga. It shows up in Kibana, its log, it starts putting its logs there. So if you look at the host itself, you can see that depending on what is on the host itself, where is it? So it starts, for instance, putting its Icinga logs to where is my? I really have to get used to this whole so you'll see prospectors for the Icinga logs, etc., etc. So it starts automatically sending a whole bunch of logs that you care about to FileBeat so that you can there start doing things. It has automatically created in the Grafana dashboard a data source for Elasticsearch and for InfluxDB. Icinga sends its data to InfluxDB so that in Grafana you can make graphs with data coming from Icinga and data coming from Elasticsearch, and as we go along, this will be more and more interesting. I think that's it for now. I see that I have 5 minutes left. So let's go and see if anybody has a question. Does anybody have a question? 0 questions. Awesome. The question is what are we putting behind Puppet? At the moment we're currently using PuppetDB. PuppetDB, there's also a plugin for the foreman, so you can check from the foreman what's in the PuppetDB. It works quite nicely together. So there is also some Postgres in there. Some of the plans involve also in pulling those parts separately to separate VMs if you want, so they become easier to manage. But for now, that's relatively standard, straight out of the box. One more question. Portability of a different operating system is a good question. So you saw that I brought up a RHEL instance. The FOSDEM image that I just brought up is a RHEL image. At the moment, we support Ubuntu, RHEL 7, RHEL 6, and Debian. But it's fairly easy to bring, because the servers themselves, they all run RHEL 7 at the moment, or CentOS 7 actually. But that's only the OpsTheater server, so the GitLab, icing, the Puppet Master, the MySQL instance. However, the servers that you manage with that, you can choose your operating system. To be honest, I haven't had a machine that is not living in my hand for quite a long time. There are some Windows machines that we're only adding in one of the deployments that we have. So at that moment, we'll probably have some role or a client for OpsTheater to have things like file reading for the Windows system to register it with icing. It will never be as fully integrated as I imagine. Sorry guys, if you're leaving the room, that's totally fine, but can you do it quietly because people still have questions? That's the demo manager speaking, not me. Sorry? Staging. The question is if there's any staging environment for this. So what I showed you now is actually the development/test environment for testing OpsTheater functionality itself. The point is that all of this brings up a control repository, and then there it's up to you to bring up a test environment and connect test machines to either the basic, the Puppet Master that comes included, or even bring up a second Puppet Master, which is also totally fine. You can have a second machine that also has the same OpsTheater Puppet role or a false master, and it will just get the same configuration. Do you have a question? Anyone else? No. I was really hoping that people would get feedback here, because so far we haven't been really speaking in public about it, because until now it wasn't really something I would recommend other people to use, and now we're getting to a point where it's really adding benefit for other users as well. So I would love to get feedback. Thank you very much.